Hi, it's Penny here, and this is going to be my October reading wrap-up. I'm going to talk about all the books I read in October, or at least the first half. I read 11 books in October, and in this video, I'm just going to talk about the fantasies and the horrors. Since the horrors I read did kind of have a supernatural element to them, so that makes them kind of fantasy. And I will save the science fictions and the thrillers that I read for another wrap-up video. As usual, I am going to do this book battle style, which means I pair up all the books and I battle them against each other until we come up with the best book of the month. Obviously, in this video, we'll come up with the best fantasy book, and then in the next video, we'll battle that against the other books to choose the true champion. So in this video, I've got a couple of dark academia books, a couple of horrors, and then a couple of older fantasies. And I will leave timestamps down below if you'd like to jump to a particular section. So let's get into talking about the books, and our first battle is going to be between Roses and Rot by Kat Howard and Vita Nostra by Marina and Sergey Dyachenko. So firstly, let's talk about Roses and Rot. This is a book where these two sisters go to this artist colony. There's a bit of history between them because their mother was quite abusive to one of them, and the other one felt like she was deserted when that one managed to escape. But now they're together at this artist colony. One of them's a writer and one of them is a dancer. But this artist colony has some kind of weird connection to the fairy world, and there is an opportunity for some of these students to make a deal with the fairies. Being the fairy world, there is a dark side to these deals, and so the sisters are kind of competing for the opportunity, but also trying to protect each other from the cost of this opportunity. This book maybe wasn't as dark as I would have liked, but I still really liked the school atmosphere, the really old buildings, all the students really being stressed out, but also the drive and the creativity, especially with that fairy element, made it really interesting. I really liked the different characters. The sister relationship was really interesting. But also there's a couple of other girls that are staying in the same house as these sisters, and I really liked those characters as well. In fact, I became really emotionally connected with some of them, and when some bad things happened, I was fairly devastated. And it's a book that I could definitely see myself rereading sometime in the future. Okay, then the other book in this battle that I read is Vita Nostra, and this is possibly one of the weirdest books I've ever read, and I still don't really know how I felt about it. We're following this girl who in the beginning is just going on a lovely beach holiday with her mother, but then she ends up meeting this man who starts asking her to do some very strange things, and this eventually leads to her going to this special Institute for Special Technologies, and this school that she goes to is very strange. They have some very strange classes. I think their first assignments is basically to memorize pieces of text that aren't written in English, that are written in languages that they don't know. And then it escalates to these weird geometric visualization exercises. Those were actually my favorite, even though they made no sense. I kind of enjoyed the stuff in this book that made absolutely no sense. And I did also really like some of the body horror. It was kind of, but in a good way, almost. And there was also this really great part that I think was my favorite, where this girl's boyfriend asks her to marry him, and she says, "Why? Aren't we happy?" If I'm ever proposed to, that's going to be my response for sure. But on the downside, I do think this book was quite drawn out and fragmented in parts. It took a long time to even get to this school, which I thought was going to be the main point of the book. And just sometimes it was going on and I didn't really know what was happening. And also, I will admit that when I got to the end, I went back and read it again. And then I went and looked things up online. And then I think I understand what happened. So this book is really weird, and it definitely will not be for everyone. So if I'm putting Roses and Rot and Vita Nostra up against each other, I will say Vita Nostra is definitely more ambitious, probably more mind-blowing, but if we're looking at the reading experience, then I enjoyed Roses and Rot so much more. I felt so much more connected to the characters, and so for that reason, I'm going to put Roses and Rot through to the next round. Okay, then we've got our two kind of supernatural horrors. First up, we've got Blaze, kind of by Richard Bachman, but actually by Stephen King, as well as The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. So firstly, Blaze. This is one where Stephen King had initially published it, I believe, under the name Richard Bachman, but then it came out that it was actually Stephen King, and I think a few of his things kind of got republished with the Stephen King name on them because it sells better. But what I will say is this was written in a very Stephen King style. If Stephen King was writing under the name Richard Bachman and thinking that people wouldn't be able to tell that it was Stephen King's writing style, then I'm not surprised that that secret didn't manage to hold, because it seems very Stephen King, which is unfortunate because I'm not entirely sure that I actually like Stephen King's writing style. I do remember I read some things by him when I was younger that I enjoyed, but now I read it and I feel just quite a lot like he's trying to be really dark and edgy, but it just feels like he's trying a little bit too hard to me. In this particular story, I think it was mostly in the backstory part of the story. So this story is about this man who, with his friend, had made a plan to kidnap this baby and ransom it for a lot of money. Unfortunately, his friend dies, and so he's now having to carry out this kidnapping without his friend, even though he kind of had an accident when he was younger, and so he's not very intelligent, and he really struggles to think things through. He does also kind of see his friend almost as a ghost, but it seems like it's more like a memory thing. So I say supernatural, but kind of not really. I did really like the interplay in the story between the kidnapping scenes and the detectives kind of trying to figure out who the kidnapper was, and like seeing the mistakes he made and how the detectives were getting closer and closer to him as he made more and more mistakes. But the ending, I absolutely hated the ending, because I came to care so much about this kidnapper and this baby, and I was really invested in their story. There was a whole bunch of backstory about this kidnapper, and then the ending was just pointless. Like, I read that whole thing and put up with Stephen King's writing style, and then there was no point to it, and it just made me really angry, to be honest. Okay, then we've got The Only Good Indians. And this one, I will say, the horror was definitely quite horrifying. We're following, I guess, 10 years after this group of friends went on a hunting trip, and they killed all these elk that were meant to be put aside for like the tribe elders because they're Native Americans. And now it seems like 10 years later, these elk are coming back and taking revenge. I did really like those intense horror parts, but unfortunately, I felt like there was just too much internal monologuing, and because I often wasn't agreeing with what was being monologued about, like especially in the beginning, the first point of view character was the one I struggled with the most, because he just jumped straight into believing this was supernatural, and as a result did some really horrifying things, and I was not there with him, and so right from the start I felt disengaged because of that. Then the second half, it was connected, but I felt like the link wasn't enough, and we were following new characters, and it felt very fractured to me, and I wasn't really sure what was really happening, and I'd heard really good things about this book, but unfortunately it wasn't really my style. There was also a lot about basketball, and I don't care about basketball. I think people who like basketball will be like, there wasn't that much basketball, but there was too much basketball for me. So unfortunately, this was not my favorite, but there were elements I really liked. There was also kind of this bit with second person and some interesting ideas about Native American storytelling, but there just wasn't enough of the parts that I liked, and there was too much of the parts that I really found boring. So if I'm putting this up against Blaze, Blaze also really annoyed me, which makes me wonder, is horror not for me? Or is it just that these horrors were not for me? I think probably just these ones were not for me. So please, your best horror recommendations down in the comments. But for this battle, am I going to choose Blaze, which made me annoyed, but I did really connect with the characters? Or am I going to pick The Only Good Indians, where I did find it quite horrifying, but for most of it, I was quite bored? I think I'm going to pick Blaze by Stephen King to go through to the next round. Okay, then I think this will be the semi-finals. So we're going to have Roses and Rot by Kat Howard up against Spirit Fox by Michey, Zucker, Reichert, and Jennifer Wingett. So, Spirit Fox. To be honest, I DNF'd this about, I think maybe a third. I don't think I quite made it halfway. I just really didn't like the writing style. And so this book is supposed to be about this world where there are these people are spirit linked, or some of them can be spirit linked, which basically happens when a human is born at the same time as an animal and they're in close proximity. They become spirit linked. This girl is spirit linked to a fox, but unfortunately that fox baby dies kind of just as it's born, and so the spirit of the fox goes into the girl. That part of the story, I read it was really traumatic. It made me cry. I actually thought that bit was quite well written. However, so much of the story did not focus on this girl. Like, it seemed like she was going to be the main part of the plot, and then there was all this other rubbish that I didn't really care about. So much uninteresting stuff. Our main girl did get raped, and it was in a way that just seemed really like a plot point, and it wasn't really taken seriously. And I was just reading it and thinking, what is the point? And I was struggling with the writing style, so I looked up a review which told me all about the plot, so I know exactly what happened. But also the review said that there was hardly anything in there about the spirit fox. There was another bit where there was a boy who was spirit linked to a cat, and I don't think there was enough of that either. So I gave up. It was not very good, which makes this battle really easy. And we're going to put Roses and Rot through to the final. Then the next battle in our semi-finals is between Blaze by Richard Bachman / Stephen King and Death Mass by Jim Butcher. So Death Mass is I can never remember what number I'm up to, 5th or 6th? I don't know, one of the books in the Harry Dresden files. The Harry Dresden books are all about this man named Harry Dresden, and he is a wizard. He's also like a private investigator, and he helps to investigate magical crimes. Sometimes he works with the police, sometimes he works with the Wizarding Council, but they also cause a lot of problems with him because they don't really approve of him. And you know what? I don't really approve of him either. Every single book he annoys me a little bit. He just has this idea that he needs to protect women all the time, but also he's constantly over-sexualizing them. And I can't tell if it's the author or the character, but I don't like it. And this particular one had some more of that really annoyed me. And the truth is that that's the part of the story that sticks with me, is Harry being a really annoying man that I wouldn't like to know. Even though, like, I think the story is quite clever. There was something about a duel with a vampire and this religious artifact, and the mystery is quite clever and interesting, but I don't remember it because I just spent the whole time being annoyed at Harry. So, if we're going to put this up against Blaze, I mean, I was annoyed at Blaze as well because what was the point of that? So that's really annoying, a difficult decision. And I do think that actually I'm probably going to pick Death Mass between these two, because even though I was too annoyed at Harry to pay attention to it, I do think the main story was a good one. And I am going to continue the series because I'm just hoping that Harry will get over that rubbish. So yes, I'm going to put Death Mass through to the finals. Okay, so that brings us up to the finals, and for the finals we are going to have Roses and Rot by Kat Howard up against Death Masks by Jim Butcher. And this is not a very exciting battle in the finals, is it? Because I don't feel like it's very hard. To be honest, my average rating for October was the worst of the whole year. But I did really love Roses and Rot, so thank goodness for that one book. If we're putting Harry Dresden, very annoying man with stupid ideas about women, up against this group of women who are driven to create great art and learn to support each other, obviously the women win. And so I'm going to put Roses and Rot through as the best fantasy book that I read in October, and in my next video I'll put that up against the science fictions and the thrillers, and we'll see whether it makes it to the best book of the month. Do let me know if you read any great fantasies during the month of October. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.